They've been spotted over battlefields, hovering above forests, and even hidden beneath mountains. From a mysterious dogfight in 1948 to a secret alien corpse shown in Jackie Gleason by President Nixon, these stories have haunted official records and whispered legends alike. In this special compilation, we're diving into 11 of the most bizarre, chilling, and often suppressed UFO encounters in modern history, from the Flatwoods Monster and the Hopkinsville Siege to the alleged extraterrestrial battle of 1979 and the disturbing implications of Project Bluebeam. Some of these incidents made the headlines, others vanished in classified files, but together they paint a picture of something far more deliberate and far more terrifying than most are willing to admit. Why were the eyewitness accounts from seasoned military aviators casually dismissed for decades? Why did the US government classify these reports, even offering implausible explanations for what these pilots and others saw in Project Blue Book? Why is George Gorman's account one of the most respected encounters ever documented? Let's try and find out.
Hello, I'm Mike Droberg, a Marine Corps veteran and filmmaker, and we will try to answer these questions on today's episode of Forgotten History.
In October 1946, a World War II P-51 Mustang pilot named George F. Gorman had a unique encounter over Fargo, North Dakota. Gorman and his training flight from the North Dakota National Guard saw him involved in an aerial battle, or so he thought. The other pilots landed at Fargo's Hector Airport, but Gorman decided to remain airborne for additional night flying time. Gorman checked in with Fargo's control tower for his landing at around 20:45 hours or 8:45 p.m. Control told him there was only one other aircraft in the area, a Piper Cub flown by a Dr. A.E. Cannon. Gorman confirmed that he could see the civilian aircraft 500 feet below him, but he reported what appeared to be another aircraft with lights onto his 3 o'clock. However, Gorman was told that no other aircraft were on radar. So Gorman flew within 1,000 yards of the object. Dr. Cannon and his passengers also confirmed the sighting. Gorman said it was about 6 to 8 feet in diameter, clear white, and completely without fuzz at the edges. It was blinking on and off as he approached. However, the light suddenly became steady and pulled into a sharp left bank. He thought it was making a pass at the tower. Then, for nearly 30 minutes, the UFO encounter by Gorman took place at speeds well over 400 miles per hour, performing impossible maneuvers that the Mustang couldn't replicate. Gorman tried to catch the UFO and got behind it at 7,000 feet, but it made a sharp turn and headed straight for his Mustang. To avoid collision, Gorman dived, and the UFO passed over his canopy at about 500 feet, but then the UFO made another implausible turn and headed back at him again. Just before a second collision, the object performed a steep climb, which Gorman tried to follow, but the UFO was too fast, and Gorman stalled at 1,400 feet. Gorman stated the object was governed by the laws of inertia because its acceleration was rapid, but not immediate. Although it was able to turn fairly tight at considerable speeds, it still followed a natural curve. When he attempted to turn with the object, he blacked out temporarily due to the excessive speed. He stated he was in fairly good physical condition and did not believe that there are many, if any, pilots who could withstand the turn and speed affected by the object and remain conscious. The object was not only able to turn and outspeed his aircraft, but it was able to attain a far steeper climb and was able to maintain a constant rate of climb far in excess of his aircraft. Gorman also stated that while it climbed at a much faster rate than his Mustang, it still maneuvered like an aircraft. The UFO was also eventually visible to the two air traffic controllers Lloyd D. Jensen, and H.E. Johnson. Johnson confirmed that he saw all three aircraft, saying that it was only a round light, perfectly formed with no fuzzy edges or rays leaving its body. U.S. Air Force officers investigated and discovered that Gorman's Mustang had a radioactive component to it. A Geiger counter gave a high reading, which was later explained as a result of high-altitude flying. Back in Fargo, the Air Weather Service revealed that it had released a lighted weather balloon 10 minutes before Gorman first saw the object. Investigators pounced, believing and proclaiming the balloon had to be the likeliest explanation for the object. A weather balloon would become the official cause for the encounter in Project Blue Book due to Operation Mogul, which fell under Strategic Air Command. This was the project involved in releasing special balloons fitted with microphones and sensors to detect any Soviet activity. This same explanation was given for the more famous Roswell incident. One thing is for certain, due to the number of eyewitnesses and other factors involved with the incident, Gorman's encounter is one of the best documented and most credible sightings ever recorded. Gorman never spoke publicly about the event, although he told friends that he was never convinced that he had been dueling with a lighted air balloon for 27 minutes. George Gorman died in 1982. September 12th, 1952. Two brothers, Eddie and Freddie May, and their friends Neil Nunley and Tommy Heyer, all residents of the small town of Flatwoods, located in Braxton County, West Virginia, are playing on the lawn of the Flatwoods Elementary School just before dusk. Suddenly, bright light streaks across the sky and appears to crash into a hillside on Fisher's farm. The boys can't believe their eyes, then proceed to run towards the crash to see what it was they saw in the sky. The Mays home was on the way to the crash site, so they stopped to tell their mother, Kathleen May, what they had seen. Kathleen grabs Peepaw's shotgun off the fireplace mantle, then gets their neighbor, a National Guardsman, Eugene Lemon, and the boys, and make their way towards the crash site. According to their accounts, what happens next is extraordinary. So what did they actually see? Was it just a meteor or something else? And was it covered up by the government? Let's try and find out.
Hello, I'm Mike Droberg, Marine Corps veteran and filmmaker, and we will try to answer these questions on today's episode of Forgotten History.
After trekking through the forest, and upon reaching the crash site, the group sees a pulsing red light. Lemon shines his flashlight up the hill, and that's when the group witnesses a terrifying sight. A 10-foot-tall creature with a head shaped like a spade and what appeared to be a dark metal dress. The creature's hands were twisted and clawed, and what seemed to be its eyes glowed in eerie orange color. It appeared to levitate off the ground, and a strange foul mist hung in the air. The creature hisses and glides towards the group, terrifying them as they flee. This creature will be later dubbed the Flatwoods Monster. Later, some of the group suffer from throat irritation, vomiting, and nausea, which persisted for days. These symptoms were passed off as side effects of hysteria, but it's worth noting that these are also telltale signs of exposure to toxic gas. May and Lemon reported the incident to local authorities, who searched the area that night but saw, heard, and smelled nothing. According to UFO writer Gray Barker's account, the next day, a Lee Stewart Jr. of the Braxton Democrat claimed to have discovered skid marks in a field in an odd gummy deposit, which were subsequently attributed by UFO enthusiast groups as evidence of a flying saucer. Another sighting of the creature was reported by Miss Audra Harper not long before the infamous sighting on Fisher's farm. Harper claims to have seen the monster while walking through the woods near her home in the town of Heaters, which is about 5 miles north of Flatwoods. Harper and her friend were walking to a nearby store. They took a shortcut through the forest. About a half mile into their trip, they noticed a ball of fire on one of the hills they were passing. At first, Harper dismissed it, assuming that one of her neighbors was fox chasing. However, when she glanced back, she saw something unbelievable. A dark silhouette of a man-shaped figure fitting the same descriptions of the Flatwood Monster. Terrified, Harper and her friend ran, escaping what they believed would have been their deaths. The day after the September 12th incident in Flatwoods, another strange sighting occurred near Strange Creek, about 20 miles south of Flatwoods. Reportedly, George and Edith Snitowski and their 18-month-old son were driving through the rural area between Clay and Braxton County on Route 4 when their car suddenly died. Mr. Snitowski attempted to restart the car to no avail. It was nighttime and the road was deserted. While the Snitowskis were trying to decide what to do, a foul, sulphurous smell filled the air, and their baby began to cry. A strange bright light filled the darkness, and the couple witnessed a 10-foot-tall creature hovering in front of the car. The description is similar to that of the original sightings, except the monster was not wearing what is presumed to be its spade-shaped hood. Instead, its head was reportedly reptilian and bony. The creature dragged its lizard-like hand across the hood of the car before drifting away into the woods. As soon as the monster was out of sight, the car restarted and the couple sped away. Almost 50 years later, after investigating the case in the year 2000, Joel Nickel of the Committee for Skeptical Inquiry concluded that the bright light in the sky reported by the witnesses on September 12th was most likely a meteor, because reports of a meteor had been observed across 3 states that night, including Maryland, Pennsylvania, and West Virginia. 3 flashing red aircraft beacons were also visible from the area of the sighting, which could account for descriptions of a pulsating red light and a red tint on the face of the supposed monster. Nickel concluded that the shape, movement, and sounds reported by witnesses were also consistent with the silhouette, flight pattern, and call of a startled barn owl perched on a tree limb, leading researchers to conclude that the foliage beneath the owl may have created the illusion of the lower portion of the creature. Researchers also concluded that the witnesses' inability to agree on whether the creature had arms, combined with May's report of having small claw-like hands which extended in front of it, also matched the description of a barn owl with its talons gripping a tree branch. Whatever your thoughts on the matter, these stories have become an eerie folktale, creating a fascinating culture in small towns around the county. An ice cream shop called The Spot opened in Flatwoods, offering a photo op with a painted iteration of the monster. Also, a museum dedicated to the monster's story operates in the town of Sutton, a few miles south of Flatwoods. 5 huge chairs, built and painted in the monster's image, have been erected around the county. Although the monster has not been seen since the original incident in 1952, its impact on the rural community has been huge. So were these sightings just hysteria, or did they really happen? I don't know about you, but I wouldn't confuse a 10-foot alien with a barn owl. However, let us know your thoughts in the comments. August 1955, Hopkinsville, Kentucky. A bizarre encounter would take place at a secluded family farmhouse, miles away from any nearby residents. The event would entail 2 entire families becoming trapped and encircled by creatures from outer space. The standoff would last hours, well into the early morning. It would leave behind visible evidence of something very strange having happened, as well as several battered and shaken witnesses. The events of the case are still the subject of debate today. So what happened that evening in the summer of 1955 in Kentucky? What type of creatures did the families witness? And what were the Kentucky goblins? Let's try and find out.
Hello, I'm Mike Droberg, Marine Corps veteran and filmmaker, and we will try to answer these questions on today's episode of Forgotten History.
Just after 8 p.m. on the 21st of August 1955, Elmer Lucky Sutton, a young man in his early 20s, was visiting his mom Glennie Langford, and 3 younger half-siblings at the farmhouse he'd grown up in, 8 miles north of Hopkinsville. On break from his job with the traveling carnival, Lucky and his wife Vera and their friends Billy Ray and June Taylor were with him for the weekend. His brother JC and sister-in-law Aileen, plus a family friend OP, were also there that night. Following a hearty supper prepared by Miss Glennie, the party of 11 had settled in for a card game, and this is when Billy Ray made an outlandish claim. While fetching water from a well a little distance away, Billy Ray noticed a strange light in the sky. It appeared to be on fire, but with all the colors of the rainbow, as opposed to flame orange. He followed the craft, not daring to take his eyes away from it. It eventually vanished over the tree line and came to a stop in a clearing. This is when he rushed back to the house and told them what he had just witnessed. Thinking it was just another one of his tricks, they would, by and large, dismiss him and carry on chatting as they were. Then came the sudden and frantic barks of the family dog, the barking of the sort that meant something was outside and approaching. However, as soon as the dog was unleashed to investigate, he whimpered and crawled away underneath the house. The family wouldn't see him again until well into the next morning after the oncoming events. Everyone in the house now edged to the windows to peer outside into the night. All the while the dog's whining and whimpers continued. Armed with a .22 caliber pistol and a shotgun, Lucky and Billy Ray stepped outside to gain a closer look. Lucky was first to notice a green, glowing object heading in their direction. The others saw it too upon his calls. As it edged closer, it was apparent that the glow came from a small humanoid figure. At the start of the encounter, the strange goblin-like figure remained at a distance. Then, as if it had suddenly realized it was under the 2 men's gaze, it flung its arms into the air and surged toward the house. Both Taylor and Sutton raised their guns and opened fire. The bullets impacted the strange creature, but merely only flipped it over. Unhurt, the creature quickly retreated back into the shadows, allowing the 2 men to return to the house. It was then they saw another goblin creature staring at them from the side window of the house. They again opened fire on the menacing figure, and again a direct hit only appeared to merely stun it. Within seconds, it once again ran for cover, away from the property. It would become quickly apparent that more than one of the otherworldly goblins had taken an interest in them. Billy Ray, with Lucky covering him, went back to the door, ready to investigate again. As he stepped outside, a claw reached down from above. Sitting on the roof, one of the goblin creatures had his hair in his grasp. Lucky shot at the silver-clad glowing figure. He hit it, but the impact only sent the strange being floating down to the ground. The bullet made a metallic ping sound through the night air. Once on the ground, the creature quickly vanished again. As the 2 men prepared to re-enter the house, they both noticed multiple glows in the trees around them. They would soon be surrounded. Back in the house, the group tried to collect their thoughts amidst the racing questions. What are these things? Were they aliens or demons? Did their raised arms indicate innocent intent? If they didn't mean any harm to the home's occupants, why did they keep coming back after being shot? Bullets may not have scared off the intruders, but someone pointed out that the bright light seemed to hurt their large, yellow-pupiled eyes. Whenever a light came on the beings, they backed away. So they turned on every light in the house and waited. Outside, it was eerily silent. One of the children began to cry. Everyone made a break for the trucks, piling in as fast as they could. They screamed away from the farmhouse in the direction of Hopkinsville Police Station. At about 11 p.m., the 2 trucks arrived at the police station, blasting out of the night, filled with at least 5 adults and several children, all of whom were highly terrified. "We need your help," they told police. "We've been fighting them for nearly 4 hours." Surprised by the peculiar details of the family's report, the police were equally struck by the genuine fear and shock apparent in their statement. Regardless of what they had witnessed, the family seemed convinced they were recounting the truth from their perspective. The police would later escort the 2 terrified families back to the farmhouse to investigate the scene for themselves. Perhaps telling of how seriously the police took the reports is their request to the nearby Fort Campbell for military assistance. Although one officer did make a report of what he thought to be a strange glowing in the woods, none of the mysterious menacing figures surfaced in front of the police. No flying saucer full of goblins, no evidence that anything had landed nearby. The police did make note of the extent of the damage to the property and the surrounding area, however. The military unit arrived shortly thereafter and conducted a sweep of the area. Shortly after 2 a.m., the Taylors and Suttons returned to the farmhouse. Unfortunately for the two families, so did the mysterious creatures. With the police and the military unit now having left, the two families again engaged with the mischievous creatures. By 5 a.m., just as the sun rose over the farmhouse, the goblins began their retreat, this time for good. A report would appear in the Kentucky New Era newspaper the next day. The once quiet and peaceful farmhouse was suddenly the desired location for UFO researchers and investigators. The scrutiny and interest became so intense the Suttons would eventually sell the farm. Theories emerged about the Suttons' claims. During subsequent investigations, the family members were questioned separately, each describing the evening's events and the creature's physical appearance, being 3 to 4 feet tall, with muscular upper bodies and atrophied legs, large glowing eyes, and pointy ears, all in a consistent manner. Different artists rendered similar sketches based on the individual descriptions, and yet Dr. J. Allen Hynek, an astronomer and UFO researcher, highly regarded for his work with the U.S. Air Force's Project Blue Book, called the Hopkinsville case preposterous and offensive to common sense, according to the 2008 book World of UFOs by Chris A. Rutkowski. Skeptics said that the family had mistaken great horned owls for the aliens. Kentucky moonshine was blamed, even though the authorities found none on the premises that night. We all laugh at that because Glennie didn't allow alcohol or even cursing on her property, said Smithy, a nearby neighbor. They were a very quiet, trustworthy family. In 2005, Geraldine Sutton, Lucky's daughter, was invited to speak on a panel at an event commemorating the 50th anniversary of the sighting. What she found were dozens of people who were fascinated by the encounter but had the facts all wrong. The information had been so misconstrued over the decades that sources were misquoting the witnesses' names and claiming that there were 12 alien beings instead of the 3 or 4 her family had estimated. I thought I had heard from the horse's mouth, she said. If people want to hear the story, let's get it right. She chronicled her family's experience in the book Alien Legacy, published in 2007, and the book The Kelly Green Men, Alien Legacy Revisited, published in 2015.
Cowboy.
What are your thoughts on the Hopkinsville incident? Let us know in the comments below. 1953, U.S. President Harry Truman passed the reins of power to his successor, President Dwight D. Eisenhower. Truman also gave Eisenhower a pretty hefty file concerning a top-secret project called Majestic 12 that Truman established by classified executive order. Majestic 12, also known as Magic 12 and MJ-12 for short, is a code name for a secret committee of scientists, military leaders, and government officials formed in 1947 to facilitate the recovery and investigation of alien spacecraft. They were also founded to work together to understand and communicate with UFOs and extraterrestrials. Majestic 12 leaked secret government documents were first circulated by ufologists and made known to the public in 1984. Having received the Majestic 12 documents, President Eisenhower was extremely interested in UFOs and ETs. There is evidence that he met with ETs secretly, in fact, at least 3 times, once at Edwards Air Force Base in California and twice at Holloman Air Force Base in New Mexico. Since the Eisenhower meetings, other instances of UFO landings at or near Holloman Air Force Base have been reported. But what evidence do we have of Eisenhower's meetings? And what did Eisenhower discuss with the aliens? Let's try and find out.
Hello, I'm Mike Droberg, Marine Corps veteran and filmmaker, and we will try to answer these questions on today's episode of Forgotten History. President Eisenhower, a former 5-star Army general, always had a strong belief in life on other planets, and in February of 1944, he was spending several days in Palm Springs on a golfing vacation. However, he disappeared for several hours one Saturday afternoon and even missed a scheduled public dinner. He was not seen again until late the following morning. So where did he go? The press questioned Ike's whereabouts, so the White House press secretary told them that Ike had chipped a tooth and had gone to see a dentist. Even at that time, rumors were that he was visiting ETs at nearby Edwards Air Force Base. The dentist's story falls apart upon close inspection. Washington Post staff writer Peter Carlson denies the story of the chipped tooth and calls it a cover-up. The Eisenhower Presidential Library has detailed reports of all of Eisenhower's medical and dental records. There is no reference to a broken or chipped tooth or a dentist visit related to the Palm Springs visit. The library also has copies of acknowledgments that were sent to everyone Eisenhower had contact with while in Palm Springs. There were records of people who he met on the airplane, people who sent flowers, the minister who gave the sermon at that Sunday service he attended, and others who played minor roles. But there is no proof of a note sent to a dentist. Years later, the dentist's widow said she had no recollection of ever being told by her husband that he had done dental work on the president. William Cooper, a member of the Naval Intelligence Briefing Team with access to classified documents, is considered a credible witness. His review of these documents revealed that extraterrestrials had made contact with Earth. The aliens warned Ike that the planet was on the path of self-destruction and expressed a desire to meet to help establish a lasting peace, which takes us to Ike's first encounter. The first meeting with the aliens and Eisenhower occurred at Edwards Air Force Base in February 1954. Navy Commander Charles L. Suggs reported that his father had attended the meeting between Ike and the ETs. Eisenhower met with two Nordic-appearing, blue-eyed ETs. A third one stood near the door as a lookout. Nordic alien is the name given to the humanoid extraterrestrials purported to have come from the Pleiades star system or resemble Nordic Scandinavians. They are further described as being 6 to 7 feet tall, with long blonde hair and fair skin. The discussions between Ike and the Nordic aliens were polite. Eisenhower sought to negotiate a treaty with the aliens, but was unwilling to comply with their demand to cease nuclear weapon testing. As a result, the aliens departed without a treaty in place. However, they returned the following year to Holloman Air Force Base in New Mexico for another meeting with Eisenhower. And there is a corroborating story to the ET meeting with Ike at Edwards Air Force Base. A man named Gerald Light wrote a letter in April 1954, claiming to have been an eyewitness to the Edwards Air Force Base meeting between Eisenhower and the ETs. Light provided details, such as watching Air Force officials studying 5 aircraft with the permission of their alien owners. However, some questioned the credibility of Light's report, since he was known to have a love of the occult and claimed to be a clairvoyant, but others, like Meade Lane, the former director of Borderland Sciences Research Foundation, confirms and believes Light did know firsthand of what occurred. There were several eyewitness reports of the second meeting between Ike and the ETs at Holloman Air Force Base in New Mexico, which is only about 120 miles from the well-known Roswell incident, and the reports are more detailed than the ones provided for the Edwards Air Force Base meeting by Light. In February of 1955, approximately 300 people saw Air Force One land at Holloman Air Force Base and taxi back out to the end of the runway. Shortly after the plane landed, the pilot instructed the tower to turn off all radar while the president's plane was on the tarmac. Soon after Air Force One landed, the radar was turned off, and 3 round discs were seen in the sky. One landed about 200 feet in front of Air Force One, another hovered over the area as though keeping watch, and the third one disappeared from visibility. Eisenhower descended from the steps of Air Force One and was seen shaking hands with a being at the door of the saucer, and then entered the unusual saucer-shaped aircraft. Ike was in the saucer for about 45 minutes. In 2012, Timothy Good, a respected author and former Pentagon consultant, publicly discussed Eisenhower's meeting with the extraterrestrials. Good elaborated on the purpose of these encounters, noting that these extraterrestrials, like many others, seemed to sought peace. They aimed to negotiate a positive resolution for Earth's problems, emphasizing the need for the U.S. to cease nuclear weapons testing. Initially, they wanted the public to be informed of their existence. However, in the final treaty, they appear to have changed their stance, opting to remain secret. Ultimately, Eisenhower signed a treaty with an alien race called the Greys. The terms of the treaty are reported to have been as follows. We would not be involved in their affairs, and they would not become involved in ours. They would help us with the developing of our technology. They would not make a treaty with any other nations on Earth. They could abduct humans for various experiments, but had to provide names of all those they abducted to the Majestic 12 Committee and return them unharmed. The public would not be informed about the existence of the Greys. In 1964, 3 UFOs flew into the airspace at Holloman Air Force Base. They were tracked on radar and actually captured on film. One seemed to wobble and eventually landed at the Air Force Base. 3 humanoids with blue-gray complexions, dressed in tight-fitting flight suits, were met by the Air Force Base commander and 4 other officers. The aliens stayed for several days as their aircraft was purportedly repaired. What was discussed in the meetings is still a mystery. It is also still a mystery as to why so many people could have been involved in the meetings, and to date, so few people have broke their silence. Through the years, there have been more reports of UFO landings at Holloman Air Force Base. Documentaries have mentioned Holloman Air Force Base as the site of a plethora of alien landings. One of the most famous documentaries was narrated by the legendary Rod Serling, UFOs, Past, Present, and Future. It was produced in 1974. It had a segment on UFO landings at Holloman Air Force Base in the 1955 meeting with Eisenhower. A later documentary, released in 1976, UFOs, It Has Begun, also referenced Holloman Air Force Base and the landings that have occurred there. There have been numerous documentaries ever since. In December of 2023, Congress passed legislation that directs the government to eventually tell the public at least some of what it knows about UFOs, but stops short of more aggressive steps. Lawmakers sought to force greater transparency around UFOs and extraterrestrial activity. The measure, which was tucked into the annual Defense Policy Bill that won the final approval with bipartisan vote, directs the National Archives to collect government documents about unidentified anomalous phenomena, technologies of unknown origin, and non-human intelligence. Under the provision, which President Biden is expected to sign into law, any records not already officially disclosed must be made public within 25 years of their creation, unless the President determines that they must remain classified for national security reasons. Lawmakers in both chambers have ratcheted up efforts to increase government transparency surrounding UFOs and extraterrestrial matters as conspiracy theories proliferate and suspicions persist that the government is concealing information from the public. Congress has reason to believe that the executive branch has concealed information about UFOs that should be made public. The Pentagon has begun stepping up the number of explanations it provides for recent videos showing unidentified phenomena, suggesting that the pressure from Congress for greater transparency has had some early results. So what are your thoughts on President Eisenhower's alleged meetings with extraterrestrials? Let us know in the comments below.
Richard Nixon was the 37th President of the United States, serving from 1969 to 1974. His 5 years in the White House saw a reduction of U.S. involvement in the Vietnam War, de-escalation of tensions with the Soviet Union and China, and the first manned moon landing. He also became the only president to resign from office as a result of the Watergate scandal.
What's that?
Tuna fish. We're going to have tuna fish salad.
Tuna fish? What am I, a cat or something? Why can't I have a hot meal? I'll tell you why I can't have a hot meal. Because you're doing this.
Actor Jackie Gleason was perhaps best known for his role as bus driver Ralph Cramden,
whose famous catchphrase was, "To the moon, Alice." It was definitely a different time back then. The actor was also said to be greatly interested in the possibility of extraterrestrials as well as the paranormal. Now to the alien part. No, not the thousands of illegally crossing our border daily. I'm talking about space aliens. Extraterrestrial life has been hypothesized to exist in the solar system and throughout the universe. This hypothesis relies on the vast size and consistent physical laws of the observable universe. According to this argument made by scientists such as Carl Sagan and Stephen Hawking, it would be improbable for life not to exist somewhere other than Earth. So what does Nixon, Gleason, and aliens have to do with the story, you ask? Well, it's a story that sounds too crazy to be true, but could it also be too wild to have been made up? Let's try and find out what actually happened. Hello, I'm Mike Droberg, a Marine Corps veteran, filmmaker, history enthusiast, and investigator of the supernatural. And we will answer these questions on today's episode of Forgotten History. Jackie Gleason was a friend and frequent golfing buddy of President Richard Nixon. According to writer Larry Holcomb, it was Gleason's known interest in UFOs that allegedly led President Richard Nixon to share some information with Gleason, including some UFO data and possibly much more. But let's go back to how this story leaked out. Gleason met his second wife, Beverly McKittrick, at a country club in 1968, where she worked as a secretary. Shortly thereafter, the two were married in Ashford, England, on July 4th, 1970. However, the marriage lasted only 4 years, and in September 1974, Gleason filed for divorce from McKittrick. She contested the divorce, asking for a reconciliation, but the divorce was granted on November 19, 1975. In 1983, McKittrick gave an interview to the National Enquirer, in which she claimed that on February 19, 1973, Nixon took Gleason to an Air Force base after the two had played golf together to show Gleason what he was told were the remains of extraterrestrials. McKittrick was not present for the event, but claimed that Gleason had recounted the details of the event to her. According to McKittrick, Gleason and Nixon had played a round of golf the day, after which the two spent some time chatting about Gleason's interest in UFOs. The two men had developed a friendship, and Gleason had been a staunch supporter of the Nixon campaign. McKittrick says that sometime around midnight, Nixon suddenly showed up at Gleason's front door in Inverrary, Florida. She claims that he was alone, without his Secret Service detail. Then, as the story goes, Nixon and Gleason drove through the night to Homestead Air Force Base, 35 miles southwest of Miami. After entering the base, Nixon drove to a heavily guarded building at the far end of the compound where the two men were allowed into the facility. According to McKittrick, Gleason told her, "There were a number of labs we passed through first, before we entered a section where Nixon pointed out what he said was the wreckage from a flying saucer, enclosed in several large cases. Next, we went to an inner chamber, and there were 6 or 8 of what looked like glass-topped Coke freezers. Inside them were the mangled remains of what I took to be children." McKittrick then said, "I'll never forget the night in 1973 my famous husband came home, slumped white-faced in an armchair, and spilled out the incredible story to me. He was late. It was around 11:30 p.m. and I had been worried. As soon as I heard his key turn in the lock, I jumped to my feet and I asked, 'Where have you been?' His reply stunned me. 'I've been at Homestead Air Force Base, and I've seen the bodies of some dead aliens from outer space. It's top secret. Only a few people know. But the president arranged for me to be escorted in there to see them.' Gleason went on to tell her, and there were the aliens lying on 4 separate tables. They were tiny, only about 2 feet tall, with small bald heads and disproportionately large ears. They must have been dead for some time because they'd been embalmed." According to McKittrick, Nixon told Gleason that these were actually the remains of deceased aliens. She said that this event shook Gleason to the core, and he had difficulty sleeping for weeks. Gleason told his wife about what he had seen and swore her to secrecy. The couple were already in the process of separating, and Beverly was also in the process of writing a book about her relationship with a mercurial and hard-drinking funny man. When the Inquirer story came out, Gleason kept silent about the allegation until 1986. At that time, he invited Larry Warren, a ufologist and the author and the eyewitness to the Rendlesham Forest UFO incident. The two men met at Gleason's New York home. According to Warren, after a few drinks, Gleason repeated the story to him. Gleason died a year later in 1987. Supposedly, the only persons he told about the incident were McKittrick and Warren. According to Nixon's daily diary, available on the Nixon Library website, Nixon was in Key Biscayne on February 19, 1973, and he did attend Gleason's annual golf tournament at the Inverary Golf and Country Club, spending 40 minutes there. However, according to Nixon administration staff member Frank Gannon, Nixon didn't seem to believe in aliens at all. When he pressed the former president on the subject, Nixon raised his eyebrows and rolled his eyes, so Gannon changed the subject. Could he have just been saving face? After all, he can't divulge that information to any mid-level staff member. And what did Gleason think about aliens? Here's a quote. "I've never seen a flying saucer anywhere personally, but have read published flying saucer literature. Most of this literature is ridiculous, but amongst the trash, there are some undeniable points that cannot be refuted even by the United States government." Gleason was quite indeed the UFO aficionado, amassing a collection of over 1,700 books on the paranormal and flying saucers. Gleason even built an impressive UFO-shaped home in Peekskill, New York, that he called the Mothership. During the 1950s, Gleason was a recurring guest on a paranormal-themed overnight radio show hosted by John Nebel, and after his death, Jackie Gleason's large book collection was donated to the library of the University of Miami. So, from what I can tell, there are three possibilities for the origin of this story. Number one, Jackie Gleason made it up to explain to his soon-to-be ex-wife his whereabouts for that night. Two, Beverly McKittrick made it up as a publicity stunt for her tell-all book. Or three, Richard Nixon really did take Jackie Gleason to see dead alien bodies at Homestead Air Force Base. Let us know in the comments which of these you believe to be true, or if you have another theory.
A three-day event, better known as the Kecksburg UFO Festival, is happening in Westmoreland County this weekend. It's the celebration of all things out of this world, including a day in 1965 when some claimed that they saw a UFO crash into the woods right outside of Kecksburg.
December 9th, 1965. A fireball streaks across the sky above northeastern North America. Sightings as far apart as Indiana to Ontario, Canada, are reported in newspapers across the country. The falling object is even responsible for a number of small fires throughout Ohio and Pennsylvania, as flaming debris falls from it, the press reports. Witnesses in Kecksburg claim that the object crashed into the woods near the small western Pennsylvania town. The area was quickly roped off, and its citizens who came into the woods to investigate the falling object were turned back by armed U.S. soldiers. However, the Army reported that after an investigation of the woods around Kecksburg, nothing was found, but numerous witnesses dispute this claim. So what really happened in Kecksburg, Pennsylvania, on December 9th of 1965? Was it a UFO or something else? And what happened to the object? And what does all this have to do with the Nazis? Let's try and find out.
Hello, I'm Mike Droberg, Marine Corps veteran and filmmaker, and we will try to answer these questions on today's episode of Forgotten History.
For over 50 years, the story of the Kecksburg incident has taken numerous twists and turns, and time has certainly not stopped the development of new studies, the discovery of new evidence, and the creation of new theories, from crashed alien technology, a downed Russian satellite, and even a secret project derived from Nazi technology. Whatever story you believe, it is undeniable that the events have left their mark on the small community. Bill Bulbush claims that he saw an object turn around in the sky just like it was controlled, before crashing into the woods. Intrigued, he drove out to investigate and found a 10-foot-long, acorn-shaped object smoldering in the woods. The way it glowed, crackled, and sparked scared Bill Bullbush, who said he did not get too close to the object, and when he heard people coming, he ran home. James Romanowski saw it too. He was part of a group of firefighters who came upon the object in the woods when they were responding to what they thought was a crashed plane. Instead, he found a mysterious metal object buried in the ground that was covered in hieroglyphics. He claimed he was then ordered to leave by mysterious men in trench coats, that he later saw the military carry the object away on a flatbed truck. This flatbed truck, carrying a mysterious object, was later seen leaving the area by a number of other witnesses too. Additionally, Michael Rambacher, a security officer for the Air Force, claimed to have guarded the object, which arrived on a flatbed truck, and which he believed was not of this world. These witnesses are, of course, attacked and discredited by the more skeptical members of the town. Why did Bill Bullbush run away? Can James Romanowski be trusted in light of his criminal record? And how about Michael Rambacher, who is now a UFO investigator and admits to have never personally seen the object? Does the similarity between the accounts attest to all their credibility? In 2003, a lawsuit was filed against NASA to release the documents from the military investigation. Then, when making a statement on the lawsuit in 2005, a NASA spokesperson told the Associated Press that in fact a Russian satellite was discovered on site. However, this possibility has been ruled out conclusively in a study of the orbital analysis of all known man-made objects orbiting at the time by one of NASA's own scientists. Conflicting statements, government cover-ups, and scientific studies have been abundant over the years. Trajectory analysis of the fireball deemed Kecksburg an impossible landing spot. Then, an error of the analysis of this study discredited even that. Broken tree branches showed what maybe the path of the object took to the ground, or maybe these trees were simply damaged by ice. Soil analysis shows damage to the soil around the time of the supposed crash. However, it is minimal and not nearly large enough to suggest a crash landing. Some suggest that maybe this simply discredits a meteor, while a UFO could have controlled or dampened its crash. The back and forth of studies and theories is enough to give any researcher a migraine headache. But what does this all have to do with the Nazis? Well, Die Glocke, or the bell, which looks very similar to the Kecksburg acorn, was a purported top-secret scientific technological device, a secret weapon, or Wunderwaffe, developed in the 1940s in Nazi Germany. At the time, German scientists were unfettered by cost restrictions and had an inexhaustible supply of slave labor, so German firms were given free rein and created the most revolutionary machines and projects in human history up to that time. The earliest mentions of the bell came from the 1920s during the Weimar era with the supposed development of the RFZ-1 anti-gravitational flying saucer, possibly with an anti-magnetic propulsion system. This research was created in 1923 and continued after the creation of the Society for Space Travel in 1927 in Berlin, of which Dr. Werner von Braun was a member. Fast forward to the present, John Ventry of Pennsylvania's Mutual UFO Network, also known as MUFON, claimed that the Kecksburg Acorn was a top-secret spy vessel launched by the U.S. Air Force and CIA using technology engineered by top Nazi scientists. Ventry is convinced that the facts surrounding this unexplained event fit perfectly with the idea that this was no UFO. Instead, it was the controlled crash of a General Electric Mark II re-entry vehicle launched earlier that week. Part of this lore are several accounts of U.S. military personnel arriving on the scene in full body suits and carrying something that resembled Geiger counters, which are devices that are used to detect ionizing radiation. In the front page headline of the Tribune Review newspaper, the following day read, "Unidentified flying object falls near Kecksburg. Army ropes off the area." An explanation offered by Ventry dismisses the talk of UFOs and discusses the similarities between what was seen by witnesses and what was launched on that day by the U.S. military. Documents declassified in 1991 by the Air Force describe an initiative called Program 437, launched in 1964 to keep the American military informed about the Soviet Union. The technology was developed using concepts designed by Nazi scientist Werner von Braun, who was brought from post-war Germany during Operation Paperclip in 1945 and employed by NASA. According to Chapter 4 of Program 437, the Air Force's first anti-satellite program, and a report by military historian Wayne R. Osterman, declassified in 1997. This system initially promised to give the United States Air Force a unique means of acquiring intelligence about Soviet spacecraft design and capabilities via direct observation of them while in orbit. The Atomic Energy Commission finished its work as the design construction agency for the project in August of 1964, while General Electric, Douglas Aircraft, Western Electric, Univac, and the Sandia Corporation framed and submitted work statements. General Electric received a contract later in September of that year, and a work order to Douglas Aircraft followed 2 days later. What followed was the Mark II, an early intercontinental ballistic system, or ICBM. The plans for America's early ICBM program were eventually bought by Lockheed Martin. Sent into space using a Thor booster, the Mark II contained an index camera and a primary panoramic camera housed within its protective carapace, with a clamshell door that opened to permit photography of the target vehicle once interception had been made. The documents go on to state that on December 7, 1965, 2 days prior to the Kecksburg incident, the Thor missile was launched from Vandenberg Air Force Base in California as the first of 4 planned R&D tests. But the launch had complications. The declassified report said a malfunction was caused by a momentary short circuit in the flight disconnect cable between the payload and recovery vehicles. The capsule containing photofilm was destroyed on impact with a body of water, but the document does not say what happened to the rest of the device. According to Ventry, a vehicle such as the one launched on December 7th would be capable of sustaining altitude for at least 2 days when the apparent crash occurred. And the Mark II possesses an acorn shape similar to that described by several witnesses. Also, Ventry notes that many people described a green glow that came from whatever may have come down near Kecksburg. Because the Mark II had a copper shielding and copper burns in a greenish color, he said this belief supports his theory. I think the fact that it was glowing green and that the Mark II had copper shields absolutely explains the event, Ventry said. However, years of fruitless Freedom of Information Act requests have been filed by numerous individuals and news agencies. Without admission from official sources, the evidence provided by Ventry can only be best described as circumstantial. So what really happened? Was it an alien spacecraft? A crashed Russian satellite? Or secret U.S. technology stolen from the Nazis? It is likely that most of us will never know for sure. Those who claim to know will never agree on the matter. However, despite all the controversy, the incident has become a lasting part of the town of Kecksburg's culture. In 2005, a UFO store was opened in the town to profit off its attention. A replica of the object that can be seen in the woods was mounted near a local fire station. It seems that only time has heightened the interest in the incident. Let us know your theory on the Kecksburg incident in the comments below.
For centuries, humanity has looked to the skies, wondering if we are truly alone. Ancient texts describe fiery chariots in the heavens. Renaissance paintings depict mysterious flying objects. And in the modern age, governments have spent decades investigating unidentified aerial phenomena, better known as UFOs. Some of the highly noted early UFO sightings include the 1561 Nuremberg, Germany celestial phenomena, where a mass sighting of unexplained aerial objects occurred. The Foo Fighters of World War II, where pilots reported glowing orbs following their planes. And of course, the 1947 Roswell incident, which fueled worldwide speculation about extraterrestrial visitors. But were governments taking UFOs seriously? Well, in fact, they were. From 1952 to 1969, Project Blue Book was the U.S. Air Force official investigation into UFO sightings. The project was headed by notable figures like Captain Edward J. Ruppelt, the program's first director, who played a key role in organizing and standardizing UFO reporting procedures. Another significant contributor was Dr. J. Allen Hynek, an astronomer who initially served as a skeptic but later became an advocate for further scientific study of UFO phenomena. Declassified documents, government worldwide, including the Pentagon and Canada's own military, have acknowledged the existence of unidentified aerial phenomena. But among all these reports, one case stands out as perhaps the most credible UFO encounter in history. A case so bizarre and well documented that even skeptics struggle to dismiss it. In 1967, a man in Canada had a close encounter that left him with radiation burns, physical scars, and a story that remains one of the most baffling tales in UFO history. So who was Stefan Michalek? And what happened to him? What was the Falcon Lake incident? Let's try and find out.
Hello, I'm Mike Droberg, Marine Corps veteran and filmmaker, and we will try to answer these questions on today's episode of Forgotten History.
On May 20th, 1967, Stefan Michalek, an amateur geologist, set out into the wilderness near Falcon Lake, Manitoba, searching for silver and quartz. What he found instead was something far stranger. Around noon, he spotted two metallic, disc-shaped objects descending from the sky. One of them landed nearby, emitting a reddish glow and making a low humming sound. The other hovered briefly before taking off into the distance. Stefan approached the landed craft, observing its seamless metallic surface and a strong, sulfuric smell. Then a panel slid open, revealing a bright purple light and muffled voices inside. He reached out and touched the craft, instantly burning his glove due to its extreme heat. Suddenly, a vent-like opening on the craft released a burst of scorching gas, knocking Stefan backwards. His shirt and hat caught fire, and he suffered severe burns on his chest in a grid-like pattern, which was caused when the craft emitted a strong rush of gas or air. The craft then rose into the sky with a high-pitched whirring sound before flying away at great speed, leaving him alone in the clearing. Disoriented and in pain, he stumbled away from the site. Stefan, now suffering from burns, dizziness, and nausea, attempted to make his way back to civilization. He had to navigate miles of wilderness, often stopping due to overwhelming sickness and weakness. He eventually reached the highway, where he was able to flag down a ride back to his hotel. At the hotel, he collapsed from exhaustion and pain, prompting staff to call for medical help. Stefan barely made it back to his hotel room, suffering from nausea, dizziness, and intense burns. The event would soon attract the attention of authorities on both sides of the border. Upon arrival at the hotel, Stefan was assisted by staff and quickly examined by a local doctor. He was then transported to a hospital in Winnipeg, where doctors noted that his burns had an unusual grid pattern that matched the vent shape on the craft. Over the following weeks, Stefan lost weight, suffered from strange symptoms, and even experienced temporary hair loss. Soon the Royal Canadian Mounted Police were alerted after Stefan's hospitalization and began their investigation. Officers visited his home and hotel, documenting his symptoms and initial statements. The Royal Canadian Mounted Police and the Canadian military conducted a search of the Falcon Lake site, but initially found nothing. Weeks later, Stefan returned to the site with investigators, where they detected radiation levels slightly higher than normal background levels, particularly near the area where he claimed the craft landed. The U.S. Air Force, through Project Blue Book, also examined the case, but did not reach a definitive conclusion. Investigators found traces of radioactive material on Stefan's clothing. The site exhibited elevated radiation levels, but the levels were not high enough to pose public health risk. For context, the average natural background radiation in Canada is 1.8 millisieverts annually, with worldwide averages at 2.4 millisieverts. The Falcon Lake readings were above these, but not alarmingly so. Stephen Mihalik's encounter at Falcon Lake not only left him with physical scars, but also profoundly impacted his personal life. In the aftermath, he faced intense media scrutiny and public skepticism, leading him to regret sharing his story publicly. This unwanted attention strained his family relationship with his wife Maria, who was struggling to support him through the ordeal, and his son Stam, who experienced bullying at school. Despite the challenges, Mihalik documented his experience in a manuscript titled My Encounter with the UFO, published in 1967 by Osnova Publications in Polish and later translated into English. He maintained that the craft he encountered was an experimental aircraft, never asserting it was of extraterrestrial origin. Over time, he distanced himself from the media, seeking privacy until his passing in 1999. Years later, his son Stan Mihalik collaborated with UFO researcher Chris Rutkowski to provide an inside perspective on the family's experience. Their book, When They Appeared, Falcon Lake, 1967, the inside story of the close encounter, delves into the immediate aftermath of the incident and its lasting effects on the Mihalik family. The Falcon Lake incident remains one of the most well-documented UFO cases in Canadian history, symbolizing the profound impact such encounters can have on individuals and their families. Whether viewed as a genuine, unexplained phenomena or a misunderstood event, it continues to captivate and provoke thought. So what do you think happened at Falcon Lake? UFO? Military experiment? Or something else? Let us know in the comments below.
The year is 1979. A unit of Green Berets are dispatched to Dulce, New Mexico to contain an underground alien force. The aftermath of the battle will leave 60 humans killed in action and an untold number of aliens mortally wounded. This was a U.S. Army Special Forces Black Op, and no one would ever know about it until almost 20 years later. At least this is the claim of government contractor Phil Schneider. He said he was in Dulce, New Mexico when it happened, and even has the wounds to prove it. He knows the alien threat is real. So who was Phil Schneider, and is he credible? Does an advanced alien civilization really exist in the underground labyrinths of Dulce? And what happened to Phil Schneider after he leaked this information to the public? Let's try and find out. Geologist and engineer Phil Schneider was born in Maryland in 1947 and worked for the U.S. government. Schneider was the son of a German commander, Otto Oskar Schneider, who was captured during World War II and repatriated to U.S. Naval Intelligence and then settled in Maryland. After Phil's father died on May 13, 1993, and his best friend Ron Rummel was found dead in a park in Portland in September of 1993, under suspicious circumstances, Schneider decided to get what he knew out to the public before it was too late. In 1995, Schneider told the astonishing story of his encounter with alien beings living underground. Schneider claimed he was involved in the construction of deep underground military bases, also known as DUMBs. These DUMBs are said to go miles underground and are connected by a network of tunnels and are completely self-sufficient with their own food, water, medication, weapons, and ammunition. He claimed he was working on a highly secretive underground base on the Jicarilla Apache Reservation in New Mexico near Dulce, a Colorado border town. But he became suspicious of the project's true intention when he noticed American Special Forces operating in and around the area. At the time, Schneider said he began construction on the underground base just like he would any other base, by drilling holes. His team drilled 4 large holes, the standard way to start construction. But what emerged from the holes was not at all part of standard procedure. All the black sooty air came up when we drilled the holes there, Schneider said in a lecture at the 1995 Preparedness Expo. Then he went underground to make an assessment when he found himself just feet away from a big gray,
a 7-foot-tall alien. The stench was worse than the worst garbage can. The entity was absolutely horrible, he said. Snyder fumbled for a pistol he was carrying. He killed 2 of the beings, but not before one of them could emit a strange and horrible energy. The alien made a sort of circular motion with his hand, waving it in front of his chest. Snyder imitated the action. The next thing I know, the blue beam hit me, and it just literally opened me up like a fish. He showed the audience his hand. The beam had burned off some of his fingers on his left hand and hit his chest. It also burned his shoes off and even burned his toenails off. A Green Beret saved Snyder's life, but lost his own in the process. But he managed to get Snyder into a lift and push the button to raise him above ground to safety. The scuffle then turned into a full-blown battle that killed 60 Green Berets and government contractors. The Green Berets reacted instantly, bringing all the firepower they could to bear on the aliens. But the aliens responded by shooting blue bolts of radiant power with the movement of their hands. The kind of bolts that blew off Snyder's fingers were turning the Special Forces soldiers inside out. Eventually, the aliens relented, retreating deeper into the complex. More than 60 people lost their lives that day, Snyder said. The other 2 survivors are living in nursing homes in Canada, he said. They are protected by the Canadian government, and no American, Snyder included, is allowed to access them. Snyder said this because they were scared of being kidnapped. Snyder was very critical of the government for keeping citizens in the dark and gave many talks on his experiences. There's a war under there, and it's been going on since that time, he said. He spoke of 1,477 underground bases around the world, 129 of them which were located in the United States. Each had a cost of $17 billion or more. He said that the black budget, hidden from U.S. government agencies and from the public, garners 25% of the gross national product. Military forces from multiple countries have been engaged in such warfare with aliens, he said. We must instill in our public officials, they must tell us the truth, he said. If the truth cannot totally come out, what's the use in us having anything called freedom? Snyder claimed multiple attempts were made on his life after he began revealing what he knew. Then on January 17, 1996, Phil Snyder himself died under suspicious circumstances. It was ruled a suicide, but the autopsy report stated piano string had been wrapped around his neck 3 times. He was found with only his head resting on a wheelchair and blood on the floor, but no blood on the wheelchair or wounds on his body to account for the blood on the floor. His wife, Cynthia Snyder, the only surviving relative, stated that shortly before his death, U.S. intelligence agents had searched his house and confiscated many things, including family pictures and writings. Coincidentally, Snyder had mentioned in his last lecture in Washington on September 24, 1995, that he was about to publish a book that exposes these government secrets and their treaties with extraterrestrials that go back as far as 1954. So what do you think? I've never heard of anybody strangling themselves with piano wire. Could it really have been foul play by the U.S. government? I guess time will only tell.
Throughout the annals of history, Bulgaria has stood as a captivating crucible of turmoil and enigma, its narrative woven with threads of both conflict and intrigue. Often outnumbered, they have battled with formidable empires such as the Persians, Ottomans, Romans, and in later times, the Soviet Union. But the Bulgarian people's roots tread deep, and they have remained in place since ancient times. Bulgaria is also a land of folklore and mystery. One example of this is that the people believe the Egyptian goddess Bastet was buried on Mount Stranja. However, stranger still is another legend. Located in the heart of the mystical Balkan Mountains lies a place shrouded in darkness and mystery, the town of Sarachina. Whispers of its ancient origins and its ominous residents has long captivated the curious minds of adventurers, psychics, and even the Bulgarian military. The unassuming village of Sarachina, located 21 miles northwest of Sofia, the capital city of Bulgaria, was just a speck on the map, until one day when the Bulgarian military showed up.
But what were they looking for? What was said to be in the mountains of Stranja? And whatever happened to the unit and its operations? Let's try and find out.
Hello, I'm Mike Droberg, Marine Corps veteran and filmmaker, and we will try to answer these questions on today's episode of Forgotten History.
On the fateful day of December 6, 1990, the village of Sarachina found itself thrust into the spotlight. A formidable military force descended upon their tranquil abode, stirring unease amongst the villagers. Accustomed to a life untouched by the outside interference, the sudden arrival of armed soldiers left them on edge, particularly when a portion of their precious farmland was cordoned off without explanation. Whispers soon echoed through the cobblestone streets, weaving tales of hidden treasures and secrets buried deep within the earth. The villagers would later confirm that the rumors were indeed true. A treasure trove was said to be located in their farmland. The military unit that had suddenly arrived in Sarachina was operating under a mission codenamed Operation Sunray and led by Colonel Zvetko Kanyev under the overall command of the Bulgarian Ministry of Defense. It was a mission that would cost the Bulgarian government over $20 million, but that was a small price to pay because it was believed that the riches of Tsar Samuel of Bulgaria were buried there. Tsar Samuel was the emperor of the First Bulgarian Empire from 997 to 1014 AD. Loyal to the Roman Empire, Samuel struggled to preserve his country's independence from the Byzantine Empire, and his rule was characterized by constant warfare against the Byzantines and their equally ambitious ruler, Basil II. However, luck would beset Tsar Samuel on the 17th of August in 986 when he ambushed the army of Basil II, almost destroying the enemy army to its last man. Emperor Basil survived the ambush, but fled, leaving behind his massive treasure hoard and supply train. And this is the booty Colonel Kanyev was looking for. Upon arrival, the area was immediately cordoned off, the site fenced in, and the military soon began digging, but little did they know what was waiting for them in the soon-to-be-discovered tunnel, something of the utmost evil. Soldiers immediately began to encounter inexplicable problems during their dig. Equipment began to malfunction, and they almost got flooded in by an underground lake. With the equipment rendered inoperable, the men were ordered to dig by hand. The soldiers picked up shovels and resumed their endeavor. Then, as they digged 20 feet down into the earth, the soldiers hit a massive stone wall they could not penetrate with their shovels. So they blasted their way through the obstacle, revealing a massive underground labyrinth. Perplexed and curious, Colonel Kanyev sent in a cadre to explore the tunnels. But as they embarked on their exploration, the men would report sightings of mysterious creatures lurking in the shadows. Soldiers immediately felt uneasy. Purportedly, they saw shadow-like figures within the caverns. Some of the sinister apparitions were said to be over 7 feet tall, while others were no more than 1 foot tall. At the same time, to add to the confusion, the base camp's radios malfunctioned. They changed radio frequencies, swapped out batteries, but all remedies proved to be ineffective. The colonel ordered a phone line from the nearest village to their command post, but the soldiers began hearing demonic voices and strange noises emanating from their lines. Then, to add to the paranormal activity, as the excavations continued, soldiers began spotting something in the skies. UFOs, like brightly lit flames, zipped overhead. Panic struck the camp, but the colonel wouldn't hear it. He would not allow some mysterious fireballs flying in the sky to curtail his quest for treasure. 2 years had passed, with no luck with the treasure, but then the men found something incredible. A translucent stone wall now blocked their path. The soldiers brought in more lights and attempted to see through the translucent barrier, and what they saw became the stuff of nightmare. At the far end of the tunnel lied a twisted creature, entrapped in what looked like the same type of translucent stone. Colonel Kanyev brought a psychic, Marina Naplatinov, to help investigate the scene. Upon arrival, he noticed that the walls were covered with hieroglyphs and other unidentifiable symbols. Then the men pointed towards the entity. Marina Naplatinov's face twisted in horror. She told the colonel that they must leave immediately, but at the same exact moment, one of the soldiers touched the translucent stone, blocking their path forward. An invisible force violently flung him back into the rock wall. His neck snapped as he slid onto the dirt floor, dead. Then a gaseous haze began to fill the chamber, obscuring the creature. The terrified soldiers opened fire. However, the bullets stopped midair and fell to the ground before reaching the creature. The entity's screeches penetrated the chamber. Blood gushed out of the soldiers' ears, rendering some of them unconscious. Colonel Konev ordered the men to retreat. The soldiers frantically retreated through the labyrinth, dazed and confused as they tried retracing their steps towards the surface. Running through the cold stone passageways, they helped the wounded back to the exit. Now, almost back to the entrance of the cave, the colonel began feeling strange vibrations in the rock, growing stronger and stronger, like the entity was rushing towards them. The vibrations grew louder, the earth began to shake, and a green gaseous haze surrounded them again. Marina Naplatinov, the psychic, cursed them for tampering with the tunnels. The colonel ordered a few soldiers to guard the entrance, and these men were never to be seen again. As the colonel and the main party made their way to the surface, gunfire erupted, along with ear-piercing screeches. The guards were gone. Once on the surface, the colonel ordered the engineers to close the tunnel with their excavating equipment. But once again, the machines did not work. Having no other options, he had the soldiers bring in explosives and blasted the hole shut, leaving their dead and the entity locked inside the chamber forever. The nightmare was over, for now. Reports were written up and sent to the Bulgarian government. The mission would come to a close, with no treasure, only death. Colonel Konev would later disclose the events that occurred in Sarachina years later in one of his many interviews. The colonel said no treasure was ever found. He explained that the operation was never about the treasure. Mission objective number 1 was set in motion when remote viewers and psychics guided the men to something alien just below the ground. During the 2 years there, Colonel Konev spoke of his men being affected by an ancient bacterium released from the dig. He talked about how his other men were found teleported around the excavation site, their bodies infused within the stone. Colonel Konev's entire experience can be found in the book he wrote, titled The Sarachina Phenomena. All seemed quiet in Sarachina for a time being. Years later, a psychic named Eli Laganova wanted to resume the excavation. According to her, an ancient alien ancestor of mankind had been visiting her in her visions, asking her to find him. Apparently, it was the entity that Colonel Konev had come across. She also claimed that Hitler had tried to see a similar entity in Russia before World War II kicked off that was in Stalin's possession, but we know how things turned out for Hitler. She journaled her visions in 3 books, but the Bulgarian government supposedly confiscated them. Also, Professor Delko Naplatinov, the father of the psychic Marina Naplatinov, who was with Colonel Konev when they found the entity, wrote about Operation Sunray. He stated his daughter was operating under the guidance of famed seer Baba Vanga, who warned her not to disturb the entity. Shortly after Marina returned from the site, she committed by jumping off a building. Later, the site also had researchers from the University of Sofia investigating it, who claimed to see UFOs and were apparently greeted by alien poltergeists. Their research abruptly ended when a bright light crashed at the center of their campsite, burning it to the ground. Rumors would circulate throughout Bulgaria of the alien entity and of an alien spacecraft found within the underground labyrinths, which the military had tampered with, causing it to send a distress signal to the alien race which had placed the craft there in the first place. Soon enough, the place was called the Area 51 of Bulgaria. Except for the professor's writings, Colonel Konev's interviews and book, and the villagers' testimonies of Sarachina, there is no official documented evidence or video evidence of anything paranormal occurring during the operations. While some consider this a hoax, others believe it was a deliberate government cover-up to veil the horrors within the deep chambers of the mountain. The official report from the Bulgarian government is stated as, after digging a 160-meter long tunnel at a depth of 70 meters without finding anything for 2 years, the project was abandoned due to financial concerns, and the hole was sealed off with concrete. Conspiracy theorist speculations about the events varies, some citing rumors claiming that the military excavated a triangular object of unknown origin, many theorizing it was extraterrestrial or of a proto-human origin. Whatever you believe,
As we conclude our exploration in the realm of Sarachina, it seems that we are left with more questions than answers. Amidst the whispers of hidden treasures and the echoes of an ancient alien being, one thing remains certain. The allure of this mysterious entity persists to this day. Let us know your thoughts on the entity of Sarachina in the comments below.
In 2003, using the pretext of Saddam Hussein having weapons of mass destruction and his alleged connections to Al-Qaeda, the United States invaded Iraq.
My fellow citizens, at this hour, American and coalition forces are in the early stages of military operations to disarm Iraq, to free its people, and to defend the world from grave danger. On my orders, coalition forces have begun striking selected targets of military importance to undermine Saddam Hussein's ability to wage war. These are opening stages of what will be a broad and concerted campaign.
After years of military operations, more than 1 million Iraqis were killed as a result of the invasion and the subsequent occupation of the country. Iraq descended into sectarian strife after the U.S. occupiers dismantled Hussein's government and its military apparatus. The chaos helped give rise to the Islamic State group through its predecessor Al-Qaeda in Iraq. Many observers believe seizing Iraq's oil reserve and ousting Hussein were the primary reasons for the U.S.-led invasion. But what if they were wrong? What if there really was a weapon of mass destruction of unprecedented power? What if Saddam Hussein had a Stargate? That's the real reason for the invasion of Iraq, according to author Michael Salla. Let's find out if any of this is remotely plausible. Dr. Salla, an Australian national, obtained his MA in philosophy from the University of Melbourne and then his doctorate in government from the University of Queensland in 1993. After spending 2 years as an associate at the Centre for Middle Eastern and Central Asian Studies in Australia, he joined the faculty of the Department of Political Science at the Australian National University in Canberra as a lecturer. Salla began his Stargate theory by presenting proof of historical extraterrestrial occupation in Iraq. He states the strongest available evidence for a historical ET presence in Iraq comes from cuneiform tablets directly recording the beliefs and activities of the ancient Sumerians whose civilization began almost overnight in 3800 BC. Most of these cuneiform tablets relate stories of the Sumerians interacting with their gods. Archaeologists initially accepted that these were merely myths and attached little importance to them other than giving them insight into the mythology and religious beliefs of the ancient Sumerians. That viewpoint received a major challenge in 1976 when the Sumerian scholar Zecharia Sitchin published the first series of books on his translations of thousands of Sumerian tablets. Rather than treating the stories of the gods as myths that had little empirical relevance, Sitchin interpreted the tablets as literal descriptions of events as they had occurred in the time. Sitchin's translations of the Sumerian cuneiform tablets reveal precise information on a range of topics that he argues could not have been possible for a civilization at the initial stages of its development with no obvious predecessor civilization to borrow from. According to Sitchin, the Sumerians had detailed knowledge of all the planets in the solar system, understood the precession of the equinoxes, and also had an understanding of complex medical procedures, and that all their knowledge came from a race of extraterrestrial visitors known as the Anunnaki, those who from heaven to earth came, who were not only teachers for the Sumerians but also played a role in the creation of the human race. So what do the Sumerians and the Anunnaki from 3800 BC have to do with Saddam Hussein and the invasion of Iraq? Well, according to Salla, the US-led 2003 invasion of Iraq was launched because the former dictator, Saddam Hussein, had a portal to an alien world. He believes that the United States and its allies invaded the country to take control of Hussein's access to alien weapons through the Stargate. Salla stated, according to the British newspaper, the Daily Star, "I think that was a big part of the reason why the Bush administration went to Iraq, to stop Hussein from revealing this information and to also get control of the Stargate for themselves." Salla says the portal was located under one of Iraq's ancient ziggurat temples. He believes that the US, Russia, Germany, and France have been aware that the Anunnaki left behind some very high-tech apparatuses and possibly weaponry when they abandoned Earth around 1700 BC, and that Saddam Hussein getting assistance from Russian, German, and French archaeological teams for years in an attempt to unravel and perhaps reverse engineer this apparatus, which Sala claims is probably far in advance of any technology we might have obtained from the Greys from Zeta Reticuli, and which is supposedly warehoused at Area 51 in Nevada. So what is the exact significance of the Stargate, and why did the US want it so badly? According to Sala, on the part of the Hussein regime, control of the Stargate would allow him to activate it and to fulfill prophecy by facilitating the return of the advanced race of ETs, the elite Anunnaki. Saddam Hussein probably imagined that in return for his loyalty to the Anunnaki, he would be rewarded with some position of great global authority. Perhaps he would even see himself as some kind of human savior, facilitating the return of the gods who would solve all of humanity's problem and end the rule of the clandestine government organizations perpetuating non-disclosure of the ET presence. So what proof is there that the Stargate even existed? He notes the powerful diplomatic support given by Germany and France to the Hussein regime in warding off a preemptive military strike. So powerful has been this support that the U.S. Secretary of Defense Donald Rumsfeld disparagingly referred to them as Old Europe in response to a reporter on January 22, 2003. You're thinking of Europe and Germany and France. I don't. I think that's Old Europe. If you look at the entire NATO Europe today, the center of gravity is shifting to the east, and there are a lot of new members. But you're right, Germany has been a problem, and France has been a problem. Rather than backtracking on what was a diplomatic bombshell, the Bush administration has instead continued to go to extraordinary lengths to isolate the German and French positions on Iraq. For example, the administration encouraged the leaders of Spain, Portugal, Italy, the United Kingdom, Hungary, Poland, Denmark, and the Czech Republic to write a letter to the Wall Street Journal on January 30th that said the Iraqi regime and its weapons of mass destruction represent a clear threat to world security. This is indeed some strong evidence against France and Germany. But where is the Stargate now? Some in the Middle East UFO community theorize that Task Force 20, which had been conducting commando raids north of Baghdad, found the Stargate in addition to the elusive former dictator Saddam Hussein. So where is the Stargate now? Area 51? Edwards Air Force Base? And what happened to it? Is the U.S. using it? I was deployed to Iraq in 2009 and never heard of this story while out there. But of course my focus was on my mission and my Marines, not extraterrestrial technology. So I guess anything is plausible. If you have more information for the possible whereabouts of the Stargate, let us know in the comments below. 1996, Seattle, Washington. A man by the name of Dr. Jonathan Reed is walking his dog in the woods when suddenly his dog takes off. The dog barks, then starts yelping in terror. What Dr. Reed encounters next is astonishing. Part reptilian, part gray alien has his dog by the head, shaking it so violently the dog's head is ripped in half, and then its corpse disintegrates into a pile of white ash. Shocked, Reed grabs a nearby stick and strikes the alien down with a fury of blows. But what happened after that? What evidence does Dr. Reed have of his encounter? And whatever happened to the alien? Let's try and find out. After his dog was killed, Reed struck the alien with a stick, killing it. He captured the alien creature on film, and the creature's obelisk, which can be seen on the footage. The obelisk was theorized to be the alien spaceship, or possibly a portal to another dimension. Also, in his video, Reed can be heard panting heavily, to the point of hyperventilating. However, critics say the video didn't shake enough, and his panic was too audible to be authentic. What do you think? Reed then managed to take the alien home, where he made a video of investigating the 4.5-foot tall alien being. He told the audience that his attempts to cut the alien's clothes were thwarted, as its black, spandex-like outfit automatically sewed itself back up every time he cut into it. When asked whether the alien was a male or female, Reed said he didn't know, adding offhandedly that he hadn't made love to her. Ultimately, the being disappeared from Reed's freezer, stolen by government officials who reportedly had government license plates on a white nondescript van. And and Reed apparently has been on the run ever since his alien encounter. He told reporters that he's been beaten up by government agents 3 times, and 2 of his close friends have been killed. He said his life has been ruined, and that he lost nearly all things he enjoyed before his encounter, such as a steady job, a home, and a girlfriend. Recently, he was shot in the shoulder after trying to wrestle a gun from a stranger approaching him in the parking lot. The controversial contactee also co-authored a book called The Link, which contends that mysterious agents are chasing Reed for a technology that the alien wore on his wrist. Something like a transmitter-receiver, this hieroglyphic engraved bracelet turned from silver to black when Reed clasped it on the alien's arm. It is believed that the wristband served as a tracking device that maintained a connection with the alien's 9-foot-long coffin-like craft. Sean Atlanti of San Diego is convinced that the government agents are hell-bent upon torturing Reed to death by physical and psychic means. Dan Iaria of Indianapolis, having spent hours with Reed, contends that the purportedly haunted Reed demonstrates credibility and character as he tells his story. And finally, Dr. Heim, a remote viewing specialist from Colorado, told the audience that his colleague was able to remotely view the alien's craft with little prompting. Regardless what the experts say, the skeptics argue that Reed's video comes across as having a little bit too much polish. They also take issue with his seemingly overdone emotions, as demonstrated by his tendency to weep mid-sentence. Further, critics wonder why Reed didn't make a greater effort to relay his story to the police from the very beginning. It's clear that the Reed story will continue to inspire debate for the near future. Most likely, the case will decisively divide the ufology community as experts grapple with how much credence should be given to an encounter experienced by one person alone in the woods. Reed became a celebrity on the UFO circuit, but many UFO fans are not convinced, saying that Dr. Jonathan Reed has refused to allow his evidence to be analyzed and that he may be even using a false name. A UFO watchdog site says it has been since discovered that Dr. Jonathan Reed is actually a Seattle, Washington resident named John Bradley Rudder. He has lived in Seattle, Washington the entire time he claimed to be on the run from evil government agents, and he isn't a doctor nor has a PhD, and has no college degrees for that matter. Furthermore, in a 2010 episode of the series Fact or Fake Paranormal Files, the Fact or Fake team was able to duplicate the entire Reed video nearly shot to shot. Since this did not entirely eliminate the authenticity of Reed's original footage, the team decided to do a voice stress test on Reed himself. The test ultimately proved that Reed was extremely deceptive about the incident. While these tests doesn't entirely prove it to be a hoax, all of the evidence points to fraud, and the alien research community has accepted that the Reed video was a fake. I asked my AI software to recreate the scene of Reed's alien encounter, and well, as you can see for yourself, I don't think the AI believes him either. But what are your thoughts on the Reed incident? Government cover-up or hoax? Let us know in the comments below.
In our obsession with antagonisms of the moment, we often forget how much unites all the members of humanity. Perhaps we need some outside universal threat to make us recognize this common bound. I occasionally think how quickly our differences worldwide would vanish if we were facing an alien threat from outside this world.
Tonight, an aerial mystery that's been described as unnerving is growing. The FBI now investigating multiple reports of unidentified drones flying over New Jersey, some as large as a small car. And today, a large drone seen here, also described as the size of a small vehicle, flying over a California event where Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin was in attendance.
In recent months, mysterious drones have been spotted over American cities, buzzing silently through the night skies. Official explanations remain elusive. Meanwhile, the U.S. government has begun disclosing information on unidentified aerial phenomena, better known as UAPs. Is this just a coincidence? or part of something far more sinister? What is Project Bluebeam? Who's behind it? And how did it come to light? Let's try and find out.
Hello, I'm Mike Droberg, Marine Corps veteran and filmmaker, and we will try to answer these questions on today's episode of Forgotten History.
Project Bluebeam is a claim that a shadowy global elite enterprise plans to simulate an alien invasion or divine event using advanced holographic technology. First proposed by journalist Serge Monast in the 1990s, the theory suggests a staged event designed to establish a new world order. But is there any credibility to Monast's theory?
We have before us the opportunity to forge for ourselves and for future generations a new world order, a world where the rule of law, not the law of the jungle, governs the conduct of nations. When we are successful, and we will be, we have a real chance at this new world order, an order in which a credible United Nations can use its peacekeeping role to fulfill the promise and vision of the UN's founder.
But who are these shadowy elites? Theorists often point to secretive organizations like the Bilderberg Group, the Trilateral Commission, or even elements within world governments and powerful corporations believed to control global affairs from behind the scenes. But is Serge Monast credible? Monast is a Canadian investigative journalist from Quebec. He gained notoriety in conspiracy circles after publishing works detailing alleged government secret projects. He wrote extensively about government mind control programs and covert military operations. His claims about Project Bluebeam were outlined in books and lectures, making him a central figure in modern conspiracy lore. Monast's sudden death in 1996, under mysterious circumstances, has only fueled speculation about the veracity of his claims. Serge Monast died of a heart attack in December of 1996 at the age of 51. His sudden death occurred shortly after he claimed he was being persecuted by government agencies for exposing Project Bluebeam. His friends and associates often speculate that his death was suspicious, with some suggesting he was assassinated using secretive methods like psychotronic weapons or that he was poisoned. Substances like potassium chloride or digitalis can disrupt the heart's rhythm, leading to cardiac arrest. Additionally, drugs such as beta blockers or stimulants in high doses can mimic a heart attack. Forensic toxicology tests are typically required to detect these substances during an autopsy. Whether a toxicology tests were conducted on Monast's corpse or not is unknown. Needless to say, Monast's passing has become part of the lore surrounding his theories, adding an air to mystery to his legacy. According to Monast, there are 4 steps to the conduct of Project Bluebeam. Number 1. Discrediting religion. According to the theory, step 1 involves the creation of artificial earthquakes to unearth ancient discoveries that discredit major world religions. The discovery of Göbekli Tepe in Turkey in the 1990s uncovered an ancient site that dates back to around 9600 BCE, predating Stonehenge by thousands of years. Its advanced architecture suggests that complex societies may have existed before our known understanding of human history, further reshaping our understanding of human development, possibly even religion. Is this one of the many sites recently uncovered to confound and confuse the understanding of our ancestors? Step 2. A global holographic light show. Step 2, massive light shows in the sky projecting religious figures or alien ships worldwide. The goal, to manipulate beliefs on a global scale. In December of 2024, several large-scale holographic light shows took place globally, captivating audience with their innovative displays. One notable event was the Liquid Light Showcase at the Darwin waterfront in Australia, which featured an impressive array of lasers, fountains, flames, and lights. Are those involved practicing their craft for widespread use of what's to come? Step 3. Telepathic communication. The next theory claims that advanced technology will broadcast messages directly into people's minds, convincing them that they are hearing divine commands. Before you think this is a bunch of bunk, several secretive government programs have explored telepathic communication and related phenomena, such as Project Stargate. Ran by the CIA, Defense Intelligence Agency, and Army Intelligence, this Cold War-era program focused on psychic phenomena, including remote viewing. The program lasted from 1978 to 1995. Claims of telepathic military communication and intelligence gathering through extrasensory perception were said to be successful. The details of Project Stargate were declassified in the 1990s, though researchers persist that advanced research continues secretly. Another project was MK Ultra. Conducted by the CIA in the 1950s to the 1970s, MK Ultra explored mind control, behavioral manipulation, and possibly telepathy using hallucinogens like LSD. The program involved unethical experiments, and its full extent remains unclear due to destroyed records. During the Cold War, the USSR reportedly conducted its own psychic research. Their focus areas were telepathic communication, psychokinesis, and mind control. Soviet scientists believed that psychic abilities could provide a military edge, and they weren't alone. China is believed to have continued its extrasensory perception and telepathic communication experiments well into the 21st century, possibly including applications in their military training. However, due to China's secrecy, not much is known about their experiments. The fourth and final stage of Project Bluebeam is the conduct of a simulated apocalypse. A staged apocalypse will create chaos, paving the way for a one-world government, promising salvation. The COVID-19 pandemic was often viewed as a real-life example where governments, media, and scientific communities influenced public perceptions and responses in ways that felt like society was in a controlled, simulated crisis. During the pandemic, the rapid spread of misinformation and the manipulation of public fear created a sense of living through an apocalypse. Mass lockdowns, supply chain disruptions, and societal uncertainty led many to believe they were witnessing the collapse of civilization. The use of digital contact tracing, quarantine enforcement through apps, and mass surveillance heightened the sense of living in a controlled environment. This mirrors aspects of the simulated apocalypse where everything feels monitored or orchestrated by a higher authority. COVID-19 caused widespread psychological effects such as anxiety, depression, and survivalist mindsets. This can be woven into the idea of society being controlled, orchestrated crisis with emotions manipulated to influence behavior. Another example of a simulated apocalypse could be that of the High Frequency Active Auroral Research Program, or HAARP, which has long been the subject of theories, with some claiming it's capable of weather modification or even triggering natural disasters. While HAARP's primary goal is scientific research, focused on understanding the Earth's ionosphere, its powerful radio waves have led to speculation about its use for geoengineering or manipulating weather patterns. See our video on HAARP. And finally, the recent government release of UAP information has sparked significant speculation, with some theories suggesting it to be part of a broader, covert operation linked to Project Bluebeam. Project Bluebeam posits that the government or powerful entities could stage a fake alien invasion. The growing openness of UAP disclosures, particularly by the US government, fuels this theory, as it aligns with the narrative of preparing the public for extraordinary events. While mainstream explanations frame UAPs as unidentified objects for further investigation, the frequency and dramatic nature of these releases lead some to believe they may be part of a larger psychological operation aimed at shaping public perception or preparing for a staged event. So as we stand at the crossroads of science, technology, and global control, the shadows of Project Bluebeam loom ever closer. What if the apocalyptic events we fear are not just the result of natural disasters or pandemics, but carefully orchestrated stages in a larger plan? One that manipulates our perception of reality, reshapes our very existence, and plunges us into a world where nothing is as it seems. Are we living through a controlled apocalypse, designed to prepare us for a new, manipulated reality? As the pieces fall into place, one thing is certain. The true question is no longer if the world will change, but how, and at whose hands. Let us know your thoughts on Project Bluebeam in the comments below.
Thank you for watching Forgotten History. Please like, share, and subscribe. If you have any comments or show ideas, we'd love to hear from you. Thanks again.